Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're tackling something I think we all want to figure out: peak performance.
It's a popular topic for sure.
Yeah, so we're diving deep into a book called Peak Performance by Brad Stulberg and Steve Magness. We've also got some fascinating articles to round things out. So if you're ready to unlock your potential and achieve those goals without burning out, you're in the right place.
Absolutely. And you know what's interesting? We often think about peak performance as this, magical state you reach and then you just kind of stay there.
Right, like you've made it to the top of the mountain.
Exactly. But the reality is a little different. It's more about finding a rhythm, a balance between pushing yourself and giving yourself space to recover.
Okay, so not a constant uphill climb, but more like riding a wave. I like that analogy.
Exactly.
So let's talk about pushing ourselves, because this deep dive actually starts with something that might seem a little counterintuitive: stress.
Ah, yes. The dreaded stress.
We've been told stress is the enemy, right? But maybe that's not the whole story.
Not even close. In fact, stress is actually essential for growth, both physically and mentally.
Really?
Yeah, think about it this way. Back in the 1930s, there was this scientist named Hans Selye, and he was doing research on hormones.
Hormones. Interesting.
But get this, he actually stumbled upon the body's stress response completely by accident.
You're kidding? He discovered stress by mistake. How does that even happen?
Well, he was injecting rats with all sorts of substances trying to isolate this new hormone he thought he'd found.
Okay.
But he kept noticing the same physiological changes in the rats no matter what he injected them with. Enlarged adrenal cortex, things like that.
Yeah.
Even when he injected them with just saline solution, it was triggering the same response.
Saving solution. That's like salt water, right?
Yeah, basically. So that's when he realized it wasn't the substance itself causing the changes, it was the rat's reaction to anything that disrupted its equilibrium.
Ah, so it's not about what's happening to us, it's about how we react to it.
Exactly. That's the stress response in a nutshell.
That actually makes a lot of sense. But how does that tie back into peak performance?
Well, think about exercise. When you lift weights or go for a run, you're stressing your muscles.
Right, to make them stronger.
Exactly. The same principle applies to your mind. A little stress, that feeling of being outside your comfort zone, that's how we learn and expand our abilities.
Okay. So a little stress is a good thing. It helps us grow.
Yeah.
But what about that feeling of mental drain we all get after a tough day? Even if we haven't done anything physically demanding, is that our mental muscle getting tired?
You got it. Our mental energy is a finite resource, just like our physical energy, and it can get depleted, just like our muscles do. There's this really fascinating experiment by Roy Baumeister that perfectly illustrates this point.
Oh, I think I've heard of this one. Isn't it the cookies and radishes experiment?
That's the one.
So what did they do?
They put participants in a room filled with the smell of freshly baked cookies.
Ooh, that's just mean.
Right. Then some participants got to eat the cookies, but others had to resist temptation and eat radishes instead.
Oh, man. I can already feel the willpower struggle just imagining that. So what happened next?
Afterwards, both groups were given a challenging problem-solving task. And guess what? The cookie eaters kept trying for much longer than the radish eaters.
No way.
You-
So even though it was a totally different task,
Mm,
just the act of resisting those cookies drained their mental energy.
precisely. It's like our willpower is a muscle, and it gets tired just like any other muscle. Think about it. Have you ever noticed that after a long day of making decisions, it's harder to focus or resist those tempting snacks?
Oh yeah, all the time.
That's your mental muscle saying, I need a break.
This is making me think about my to-do list in a whole new way.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to have to be more mindful of my mental energy levels. So if stress is like exercise for our minds, does that mean rest and recovery are just as crucial for peak performance?
Absolutely. It's all about finding that rhythm, that ebb and flow of pushing yourself and then allowing yourself time to recover. It's like interval training for your mind bursts of intense effort followed by strategic breaks.
So we're not talking about pushing ourselves to the limit 24/7. It's more about working smarter, not just harder.
You got it.
And what's one of the best ways to transition from that state of stress to a state of rest and recovery?
Well, the book talks about mindfulness.
Mindfulness,
Mm-hmm.
right? I've heard a lot about it, but I'm still a bit fuzzy on the specifics. What's the science behind it, and how does it actually help us achieve peak performance?
Well, they tell the story about Chade Meng Tan, Google employee number 107.
Wow, one of the first employees at Google? That's pretty cool.
Right. So he realized that even at Google, with all the excitement and innovation, the always-on culture was leading to burnout. People needed a way to switch off, to detach from work and recharge.
Makes sense.
So he developed this mindfulness program called Search Inside Yourself.
So even tech giants are realizing the importance of rest and mental well-being.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is that mindfulness meditation, even just a few minutes a day, has been shown to physically change the brain.
Hmm.
It can actually increase gray matter in the prefrontal cortex.
Okay, that sounds impressive. But I need a little neuroscience 101 here. What's the prefrontal cortex and why should we care about it?
It's basically the command center of your brain.
Huh.
It helps you regulate your emotions, make decisions, and you guessed it, transition between stress and rest.
Ah, I see. So by strengthening our prefrontal cortex through mindfulness, we're giving ourselves more control over our stress response and our ability to relax and recharge.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just feeling calmer. Mindfulness helps you become more aware of your thoughts, feelings, and physical sensations. It's like tuning into your internal dashboard.
Interesting.
And that awareness allows you to choose how you respond to stress rather than just reacting to it.
Okay, this is starting to make a lot of sense. But switching gears a bit, the book also tells this incredible story about a man named Tom Boyle who literally lifted a car to save a teenager's life.
Oh, yeah, that's a crazy story.
Is that even possible? How does someone get that kind of superhuman strength?
Well, it's called hysterical strength. And it's a real phenomenon. In these really high stakes life or death situations, our survival instincts take over, and we can actually override those usual limits our brains put in place to protect us.
So it's like we're tapping into a hidden reserve of strength that we don't even know we have.
Exactly.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
But obviously, we can't go around lifting cars every day. Is there a way to tap into that kind of power in a more sustainable way?
That's where the power of purpose comes in. When we connect our actions to something bigger than ourselves, a cause we really care about, we unlock this level of motivation and resilience we might not access otherwise.
So instead of just focusing on our personal goals, we should be thinking about how our actions contribute to something greater. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But how do we actually find that purpose? It feels like this big abstract concept.
It doesn't have to be this huge life-altering mission. Sometimes it's just about connecting the dots between what you're doing and how it impacts other people. The book mentions this study where college students were working as phone solicitors calling for donation, and they saw a huge increase in the amount of money they raised after they heard from a scholarship recipient whose education was funded by their efforts.
Wow. So just knowing their work was making a real difference in someone's life gave them that extra motivation. I can see how that would be powerful.
Yeah, and it works on a personal level, too. The book tells the story of Jennifer Farr Davis. She's this amazing athlete who holds the record for the fastest hike of the Appalachian Trail.
Oh, wow. That's intense.
Right, so she was at this point where she was ready to quit, exhausted, doubting herself. But then her husband reminded her why she started in the first place.
What was her why?
It wasn't just about the record. It was about pushing her limits, inspiring others, and proving that women could compete at the highest level. And that shift in perspective, that reminder of her purpose, gave her the strength to keep going.
So it's like having that powerful why can help us push through those tough moments and achieve things we didn't think were possible.
Exactly. Purpose acts like a fuel source, especially when things get challenging. But it's not just about overcoming adversity. It can actually enhance our performance in everyday situations, too. Think about elite athletes.
Yeah.
They often tap into a sense of purpose to push through those grueling training sessions and stay focused during competitions.
Makes sense.
Mm.
They're not just competing for themselves, they're representing their team, their country, or a cause they believe in. It gives them that extra edge.
Right.
Speaking of achieving peak performance, I'm curious about the role of routines. We always hear about the strict routines of successful people. But is it just about being organized, or is there something more to it?
Routines are more than just scheduling your day. Think of them as primers for your mind and body.
Primers.
Yeah. Like when you follow a consistent routine, you're signaling to your brain,
Mhm.
okay, it's time to focus, it's time to perform.
So it's like creating a mental shortcut to that peak performance state.
Exactly. But that doesn't mean we all need to follow the exact same routine. What works for one person might not work for another.
Right? Like, what if I'm a night owl and someone else is a morning person?
That's where understanding your chronotype comes in. Some people, the larks, naturally thrive in the morning, while others, the owls, do their best work later in the day.
Oh, interesting.
So pay attention to your own energy levels throughout the day and schedule your most demanding tasks for when you're at your peak.
I'm definitely a morning person. I get so much more done before lunch. So I should be tackling those big, challenging tasks first thing in the morning, right?
Absolutely. And save the less demanding things or the tasks that need more creativity for your off-peak times.
That's a good tip.
But it's not just about scheduling tasks. The book also talks about this concept called ecological psychology.
Ecological psychology. That sounds complicated.
It's actually pretty simple. It's the idea that your environment can influence your behavior.
So it's not just about decluttering my desk. It's about being more intentional with the cues in my surroundings.
Exactly. Imagine trying to focus in a dimly lit, cluttered room versus a bright, organized space. One practically invites procrastination, while the other sets you up for productivity.
Okay, this is making me want to redecorate my entire workspace.
Yeah.
But it goes beyond the physical space, right? What about the people we surround ourselves with?
You're hitting on a key point. Energy is contagious, both positive and negative. And the people you spend time with have a huge impact on your own performance.
I've definitely noticed that.
Think about it. If you're constantly surrounded by negativity, it's going to be that much harder to stay motivated and focused.
So we should be intentional about building our own little support system. People who inspire us and push us to be our best.
Exactly. Surround yourself with people who challenge you to grow, who support your goals, and who energize you. Just being around those kinds of people can make a world of difference.
So it sounds like we really need to be choosy about who we let into our inner circle if we want to be at our best.
Mm.
But before we wrap up, I want to go back to something we talked about earlier, purpose. You said it kind of ties everything together. Can you expand on that a little?
Sure. We've talked about a lot. Stress, rest routines, surrounding yourself with the right people. But purpose is that driving force, the fuel that lets us push past the limits we set for ourselves. You know, there's this researcher at the University of Michigan, Victor Stretcher,
Okay.
and he believes that focusing on a purpose bigger than ourselves can actually change our brains.
Wait, really? Just thinking about my purpose can change my brain. How's that even possible?
Well, he found that when we focus on something beyond our own self-interest, our ego kind of takes a backseat. And we tap into this wellspring of motivation and resilience.
Interesting.
It's like it literally rewires our brains,
Yeah.
making us more receptive to challenges, more likely to overcome fear and take action.
So purpose is like this mental shield against all those doubts and anxieties that hold us back.
Yeah.
I like that analogy. But I got to be honest, sometimes finding that purpose feels kind of overwhelming. Like, how do I know what my big why is?
You know, it doesn't require some big epiphany. It can be as simple as connecting your daily actions to something you care about. Think about those college students we talked about making those fundraising calls. They felt more motivated knowing their work was directly helping someone's education.
Right.
Maybe your purpose is about giving back to your community, supporting a cause you believe in, or even just being the best parent or friend you can be.
That makes it feel a lot less daunting. It's not about finding this one huge thing.
Yeah.
It's about finding meaning in what we do every day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
For me, I feel most energized when I'm helping others learn and grow.
Yeah.
That feeling of making a positive impact, even a small one, that's what really fuels me.
There you go. That's a perfect example. And it highlights a key point here. It's not about copying someone else's purpose. It's about finding what truly resonates with you. What makes you come alive? What mark do you want to leave on the world?
So where do we go from here? We've covered a lot today. How can our listeners actually use this information in their own lives?
Well, remember, peak performance isn't a destination. It's a journey. It's about finding that balance between stress and rest, pushing yourself, but also giving yourself space to recover. It's about designing your days and your environment to support your goals.
Right.
It's about finding those people who energize and inspire you. And most importantly, it's about connecting with a purpose that gives meaning to everything you do.
So many great takeaways. But if you had to pick just one thing you want our listeners to remember, what would it be?
Here's a thought. Think less about yourself, and you might just find yourself achieving more than you ever thought possible.
I like that.
Take some time to think about what really matters to you. What are your values? How can you align your actions with your purpose, even in small ways?
That's a great note to end on. All right, everyone, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Go out there, find your purpose, embrace the challenge, and unlock your peak performance. We'll see you next time.